we are in Antibes, my level based on the real place in France. Sorry, Antibes, for the liberties I've taken and for the offence I cause with the poorness of my reproduction. This is a built version of the map, but you can see the telltale sign of lighting needs to be rebuilt 68 unbuilt objects. So I changed something, God knows what, and now I've got to rebuild the whole damn thing, which will take hours and hours. How else can you tell it is static lighting? I set the landscape to have a nice high resolution, which means it's using some pretty big textures. Pardon me. But also you can see the resolution is high but not perfect. It's a bit jagged. Now this happens to be a very large mesh, which is the entire harbour, which is probably a really stupid way of doing it. But it means that the resolution of that light map must be pretty big. I forget what. Oh no, 1024 is it? 1024? That can't be right. Well, blow me with a feather. It's okay, fine. That seemed to work. That's the light map. That's the texture. Yeah, less about that the better. So Lightwave doesn't make very good light maps, but every surface has a unique point in this texture, and then the engine will render that with the appropriate lighting to bake in. It's slow and it's big and it takes up big textures, though less than I thought. But if you have your light map too low resolution, that's horrible. You get jagged stuff, or you get errors and black bits, and it's just horrible. Let me try and find examples. So that in this game I made big blocks at a time manually, which sucks. I would definitely go modular and merge meshes in future. So this needed a lot of materials, but doing it all at once, it saves time. God, that's quite a low. I'd forgotten how low these were. Okay, so that kind of works. Let's just go back and see what the light map is before we say goodbye to light maps. So it's a mess, and that took a lot of hand tweaking to avoid bits where it was just too small to pick up a pixel. Yeah, never again I swore. Though I might go back to this method if I didn't have to do light maps, which is now the case. So this was a nightmare with light maps, and I can't get that bit of my life back now. Anyway, we want to go dynamic, so first thing we do, deep breath, world settings, force no pre-computed lighting. We build once, it'll crash, because that's the kind of thing that happens. Save it as a new version, which I did. I accept no responsibility for massive cock-ups that may occur. This is quite a simple map because there are very few other lights other than the sunlight and the skylight. So the build failed. Why did it fail? Whatever. A lamppost I don't care about. Ivy. I don't think I really had an error, to be honest. So that's unexpected. But another thing is I haven't set. There's no sun. Directional light. So this is my sunlight. Movable. So that's now dynamic. Not going to mess with stationary. Fully dynamic. That's good enough for now. But let's look at what we might change. I don't want to cast static shadows. Doesn't make a difference. Light shafts, not of interest. The ray trace distance field shadows doesn't make a huge difference. That's fine. Again, maybe I'm missing something there. Cascaded shadow maps are fine. Max draw distance, fine. So that's all set up basically. The skylight is wrong. Why is the skylight wrong? Well, it's static. Let's make it movable. And that is most of the work done, to be honest. So why is this so horrible? Well, the answer is twofold. The first thing is the self-shadow bias of the mesh. So let's bring up the mesh. I forget where it is, somewhere down here. This is 4.20, so it could be somewhere else. But if you make this something like 20, it's a lot better already. I also fiddled with the mesh distance field. I'm going to take that down again in an attempt to fix a problem I can't fix another way. So if you run out of ways to fix a problem, try fiddling that, but that doesn't usually work. For things which are very thin or hollow, that can help because the distance mesh field may just miss the relevant bits of the mesh. Now we wait. There we are. So it's still a little bit harsh, but it's much less harsh than it was. So yeah, maybe for this mesh it needs to be that little bit higher. Let's save that and go back to here, and that's now softened the shadows considerably. So that is possibly enough. But the other thing is, in the skylight, one thing that can soften shadows is the exponent. If you bring that down or take it up, you get very different effects. So I'm going to generally soften that a bit. So you get a nice ambient occlusion effect, but with the minimum of horrible black bits. So what you need to do is now go around all the meshes. Let's do one more for show. And it could be quite a quick search for bias 30, save, done. And yeah, that's basically all you've got to do. It's now running a bit slower for me. That's because I got all these meshes open that I didn't have before. So you must know that when you have lots of meshes open with the dynamic dynamic preview on, it slows things down. Now for this map, there's not that much going on. It's very well LODed down. I've got lots of LODs. So if it's running this smoothly in editor, it will definitely run smoothly in a game or when packaged. The shadows are nice and soft because of the mesh fields / cascades, whatever. I don't see any major problems. I mean, that mesh is not smoothed for some reason. That's a problem, but a separate problem. But looking at the shadows as I'm doing, it's all basically fine. The foliage is generally nasty. There is something going on there that doesn't seem to be shadowing properly. So I'm just going to investigate that. I haven't looked at this for a while. It's an azalea. So just going to investigate. This too has a bias, self-shadow bias. So I'm going to move that across. Well, I'll do it here. Will that make a difference? Probably not. Is this shadowed? No, now it is. So that is much nicer. Don't know why I turned that off, but yeah. So the foliage looks nicer than the static build. So foliage is one area where you can get worse results with static builds because you have to have such piddly little light map resolution. This thing is not casting a dynamic shadow. Let's just load it all up. Now I'm going to do it one by one. I want the satisfaction of seeing my foliage turn nice. Now there's one other bit of foliage that looks especially horrible. It looked even worse. Static lit. Oh, right, these things. Aloe vera. Boing. Much better. Grounds it, ties it into the landscape. This grass, where's the grass? Let's do it. Nice. So suddenly, oh, looks much better. Much better. This is a prime candidate for the self-shadow bias. Here it is. Just gonna do that. It's doing the mesh distance field though, so that's not final. It's not great, but that's workable. Maybe the skylight exponent needs to be a bit more like that. Don't know. So that's a bit ugly, that one. I guess I could ramp up the bias even further. You know. So I'm wiping out most of the shadow, but I think I'm fine with that. So that's the fine tweaking to get the best out of your dynamic lighting, but that should run fine. The foliage, you get another set of things to change. The sunlight actor, oh, see, that's horrible. I must fix this. It offends me. These are all one-offs. So yeah, that's no good still. Oh, right. I think here's the interesting thing. Also, that's that is a separate mesh. So that can be fixed by merging the meshes, because that mesh is shadowing that mesh. But this one, again, if I do that, that interestingly does change that. But actually, I think I want this mesh just to not cast a shadow. So you get some funny blobs where meshes are put together, but just turn that off. Oh, I see. That wasn't what I wanted. So what is that mesh exactly? Because I think I've got, yeah, I'm best off merging that mesh, and that should fix that problem. You also need to make sure the meshes are fully closed for the mesh distance stuff to work, so maybe that's also a problem. This is like the worst way to build a mesh ever. Did I select that, or did I select that? Yeah, maybe this one's on. No, because then there's no. Yeah. Well, let me do it in real time. This is rather prone to crashing the editor, but let's right-click, merge actors, and I think that's what I want. Okay, let's move this over. So it's merging those two things. I do want to generate a distance field. I don't care about light maps, doesn't matter, it's not going to be used. Replace the source actors, no, because in this case I will, just for the sake of demonstration. I'm not going to bother putting it anywhere special for the purposes. Just going to see what happens to the shadows. So yeah, mesh merging is another thing you can do to get rid of artifacts and blobs and things. And the bonus is also it just renders better because it's doing fewer drawcalls. So what has happened here? We have a functional mesh, probably, and the artifacts are back because it's a new mesh. So self-shadow bias, 30, there we go. So that is now a fixed functional mesh. And I think that just needs to be smoothed in my editor. Is that in fact part of the thing? Okay, so I've screwed that up somehow, but I can live with that. So there you go, everything can be fixed, usually. Yeah, and so I'll just carry on around the map, fixing each mesh in turn, and then I'll have a fully functional dynamic lit map. Here is a quick example of troubleshooting a bit of dynamic lighting. I've got some funny meshes now. You're supposed to have them all closed for it to work with the distance field meshes. This is not closed. Fiddling with this mesh didn't do anything. this mesh has some horrible shadow artifacts. I was investigating whether the landscape had an effect or anything else, and I was trying to selectively hide things one by one to track down what was causing the issue. Let's see if that one affects that. No, but in the end I have this funny, weird, very long mesh, and the length and size of it is going to cause problems anyway, and when you hide that, the problems go away. So the first thing I tried was to try a bigger distance mesh. Now 1 meg distance field for this whole long thing suggests it'll be very low resolution, so I'm just going to build that, and that's better, and if I was to build it again I might get a better result, but in the end, because it's just kind of a bit of road that doesn't affect anything, the easiest thing to do is to select the mesh, and then we go down and we say it does not affect distance field lighting. So the shadow is not quite right, but it's also not so very wrong. So I can live with that. I need to just check the whole length of it to make sure there's no funny stuff. It turns out that also caused a big shadow artifact here. Oh, it did before I rebuilt it with a bigger resolution, but also had a glitch here which I couldn't track down, but inadvertently fixed it with this. So there you go. And overall I need to rebalance the intensities of the lights. There's something funny going on with the exposure, auto exposure, but having done a few more meshes, this is, I mean, there's shortcomings of the whole stuff I've built. It's all a bit amateur hour, but the lighting is now on a par with static, and that's good to go into games like Squad and Ground Branch, with obviously more stuff added for the gameplay. So yeah, just again, I'm not quite sold on the intensities. So I need to play with that just to get that scaled right. Maybe that is better. Anyway, and each game has its own post-processing, so if I stick that into Sandstorm it'll look totally different, for example. Anyway, there you go.